I'm not a paranoid person. I'm the opposite, actually. I overshare. I make friends with cashiers. I hold doors for people who are still half a block away. I've always had that attitude of bad stuff happens to other people. And even if it did happen to me, I'd handle it. You know, that sort of sunny delusion. This started the fall after I moved for a new job. I'd just gotten out of a long relationship that made everything feel heavier than it needed to be. The job was in a mid-sized city, big enough to have food trucks and a decent comedy scene, small enough that people still waved you into traffic. I was renting a little studio above a cafe. The apartment was all creaky floors and stubborn windows, but it faced a tree that turned bright orange in October, and the rent didn't make me cry, so I loved it. I didn't own a car at the time. I walked everywhere. My place was on a corner where the crosswalk signal takes forever, so I saw a lot of faces waiting on that curb. Dog walkers, kids with scooters, old guys with newspapers tucked under their arms. There was one face I started noticing more than once. Medium height, brown hair, always a black hoodie even when it was warm. I can't remember the first time I registered him. He kind of blended in the way people do when they're intentionally trying not to stand out. I didn't think anything of it. The first weird thing was small. I got a text from a number I didn't recognize that just said, "You look tired today." Long day? I assumed it was a wrong number, laughed it off, and texted back, "Wrong person." They replied with a thumbs up. End of story. Or so I thought. A week later, same number. "You shouldn't walk home alone so late." I stared at it for a second. I had gone to an open mic with a coworker and walked back around 11. I hadn't posted about it. I didn't tell anyone I was heading home. It made me think of how I must look from the street, my window light switching on, my silhouette crossing the room. I texted back again, trying to be light. "Seriously, who is this? If you're messing with me, it's not funny." No reply. The cafe downstairs had a bell that jingled in this cheery, old-fashioned way. The next morning I went down for coffee, and the girl behind the counter, the one with the face tattoos that look like little constellations, asked me if I wanted my usual. That made me weirdly proud, like I'd achieved some kind of neighborhood local status. I sat by the window and scrolled through my phone, half people watching. The crosswalk guy in the black hoodie was there again, hands jammed in his pockets, shifting from foot to foot. He looked up and met my eyes. It wasn't like a cute meet cute moment. It was like he'd been waiting to check that I was looking. Then he crossed. I had this flicker of instinct, like you get when a streetlight goes out and you feel the dark moving around you. But I shook it off. I put my cup in the bus bin and went upstairs. That night there was a note under my door. It was on a torn piece of brown paper bag, folded in half, slid all the way under so it was by the mat. No envelope, no tape. The handwriting was neat and careful, like someone writing on lined paper, but there were no lines. It said, "You smile at everyone. Save some for me." I remember feeling annoyed, like I would if someone had dinged my car in a parking lot and not left a number. Annoyed, not scared. I'm embarrassed to tell you that, because obviously in hindsight, that's not a normal thing to find. But I told myself it was a dumb prank. College kids upstairs, maybe. I tossed it in the trash. The next 2 days, nothing. I forgot about it. Then I came home on Friday and there was another note. Same paper, same handwriting. "You forgot your umbrella." I can tell you like the rain, but you shouldn't get sick. I hadn't used an umbrella because I really do like the rain. And yes, I'd been soaked, hair dripping into my eyes. I stood there in my doorway, with my keys still in the lock, and just listened. The building was quiet, except for the refrigerator humming. I looked down the hall. The carpet had one of those ugly, busy patterns meant to hide stains, and I remember focusing on that, like if I stared hard enough, I'd catch the pattern moving and figure something out. I called my friend Hannah, who's the practical one. She told me to talk to the landlord and to hang a bell on my door so I'd know if anyone messed with it. So I wrote an email to the landlord about anonymous notes and went to the dollar store to buy a fake Christmas bell garland. I put one bell on my doorknob and another on the window latch because it made me feel like I was doing something. That weekend, I went to a farmer's market with Hannah. We ate apples and watched a magician do a trick where he swallowed a string and pulled it out his nose. When I got home, my front door was locked, but the bell was gone. Not on the floor, not in the hall, not in the apartment. Just gone. The window bell was still there. I swear to you I didn't misplace it. I checked everywhere. Under the rug, behind the shoes, in the umbrella stand. It had been taken off the knob, which meant someone had been inside. I called the landlord again, and this time he actually picked up. He said something like, "We haven't had any problems in that unit." The previous tenant never mentioned anything. He offered to change the lock for $70, as if the lock was the problem. I paid it, because $70 felt like the price of a little peace of mind. That night I slept with the TV on low and the overhead light off, so the room was mostly dark but not pitch black. The building had radiator heat, so there was always this settling clank when the pipes shifted, like distant footsteps. At 2 a.m, someone knocked on my door. Not a polite, neighborly knock. It was a hollow, almost playful little tap. Fingertip, fingertip, fingertip. I sat up in bed and froze. The tapping stopped. I could hear my own heartbeat. I waited. Then there was the whisper of paper sliding under the door. I didn't get up for a long time. It must have been 15 minutes before I worked up the nerve. The note was short. "You changed the lock." Good thinking. My hands shook so hard I almost dropped my phone. I called 911. I don't know what you expect cops to do in situations like that, but I learned what they actually do. 2 officers came. They were nice enough. They looked around. One of them did that thing where he shines a flashlight even though all my lights were on. He asked if I had any troubles with anyone. I said no. He asked if I had a boyfriend. I said no. He asked if I had an ex-boyfriend. I said yes, but he lived 2 states away and was more allergic to effort than I am to cats. They waited with me for a while and then said to call if anything else happened and suggested I get a camera. The next morning, a package showed up downstairs with my name on it. I assumed it was the overpriced shampoo I'd ordered, but it wasn't. It was an umbrella. Black, small, with one of those curved handles like a cane. No note. I left it on the cafe counter and told them to keep it in case someone asked. The barista said, "Creepy. In that way you say, 'Wow, the milk went bad.'" And I tried to borrow her tone like it could be contagious. I bought a little camera that stuck up in the corner near my ceiling and talked to my phone. I didn't want to turn it into a project. I didn't want to turn into someone who wakes up at every noise. But I also didn't want to be an idiot. I set it so it would send an alert if it detected a person. which I figured would mostly just ping me when I walked around my own apartment. That night it pinged me at 4:09 a.m. The alert on my phone showed a gray, grainy still image of my door. For a second I was relieved, because it was my door as seen from inside, and I thought, okay, it's probably reflecting some leg from a passing car, right? But then the clip loaded. You know how our brains love faces? Even when there isn't one, you see faces in clouds and wood grain. This was a face. For a split second, a face appeared in the peephole, not peering in, pressed against it from the hallway side so that the peephole made his eye bulge like a fisheye. The angle made his features distort, but I could see the pale skin, the dark hair, the edge of that black hoodie. He was staring in, trying to see, and because peepholes don't work in reverse, the camera caught me in perfect high definition staring back. I didn't sleep after that. I sat on the couch and watched the door until dawn like I could hold it closed with my eyes. When it was light, I went downstairs and showed the cafe girl the clip. She covered her mouth with her hand and said, "That's from a horror movie." I called the non-emergency number. They told me to file a report online. I did. I printed the report at work like evidence of something and put it in a folder. It felt ridiculous, and also like the only sane thing. Hannah brought me one of those door wedges and a can of pepper spray. The wedge did make me sleep better, but nothing happened for a week. I got used to the quiet in that way we always do. I convinced myself I'd overreacted. The brain is good at taking fear and folding it into a drawer so you can go to work and answer emails. I went to happy hour with coworkers. I took a yoga class and got annoyed at a girl who grunted during downward dog. Normal stuff. The next time it escalated, it was so small I almost missed it. I have a plant I keep on the little metal fire escape outside my window because it gets more sun there. It's this fat, happy pothos that's somehow hard to kill, which is perfect because I'm not great at keeping things alive. I check on it most mornings. I glanced out and had that feeling like when you're looking for your car and realize it isn't where you left it. The plant was there, but it was wrong. The vines weren't hanging the way they usually do. I opened the window and leaned out. Someone had braided the vines. It was tidy. The kind of braid someone does when they're alone and bored. I stared at that weird little rope of green and felt something slide cold down the back of my neck. My window was only a floor above the alley. Anyone could reach up if they were tall. But the braid was tied off with a bit of thread that looked familiar, and it took me a while to realize it was thread from one of my sweaters, like that fluffy cotton that comes off after you wash it. Not supernatural, not obvious, intimate. I went to Hannah's after work and tried to act normal. We watched a cooking show where they made pasta from scratch like it's not basically glue and fancy clothes. She poured me wine and I finally told her about the plant. She listened and then said, "We should talk to your neighbors. Someone has to have seen him, so we made flyers." I know, that sounds dramatic, but we kept it simple. We're seeking information about suspicious activity in this building. Please text if you've noticed anything unusual. We put my Google Voice number and stuck them on the mailboxes in the front door. I figured the landlord would be mad, but he wasn't. Or if he was, he didn't call. A woman from the second floor texted within an hour. She said she'd seen a guy sitting on the stairs late at night. She thought he was a delivery driver on a break. Another text came in at midnight from someone who didn't identify themselves. He stands in the alley sometimes. It read, I thought he was your boyfriend. I didn't sleep at my apartment that night. I slept on Hannah's couch with the kind of tension sleep that leaves you more tired in the morning than if you hadn't slept at all. I went back the next day with her, in the daylight, because I didn't want to look like I'd abandoned my own life. You can be scared and stubborn at the same time. That's one of my few talents. There was a letter in my mailbox, not a note. A full-on letter in a white envelope with a stamp, but the address was handwritten and didn't have a return name. Inside there were 3 pages, lined paper, written slowly and carefully in blue ink. I won't read you all of it. I couldn't, even if I wanted to, because parts of it live in my head like static now. The gist was this. He'd been seeing me for months. He liked how I moved. He liked that I wore the same gray coat most days. He didn't like when I talked to other people. He didn't like when I went anywhere he didn't expect. He wrote, I know you think you want freedom, but freedom is just loneliness with better PR. That line made me snort despite everything. He ended with, please do not make me feel like a fool. I am not a fool. I showed the letter to the police. This time they took it seriously. They used words like credible threat and pattern. They asked if I could think of anyone from work or my past who might have fixated on me. I said no, but then I hedged and said, well, there was this guy at the bus stop once who stood too close. But wasn't that every bus stop ever? They asked about my ex again, and I gave them his name. They said they'd talk with the building manager about cameras and asked if I'd be willing to install a second one facing the window. The officer, the older one, said, I know it's not what you want to hear, but this could go on for a while. After the police left, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and read the letter again. I was looking for something in it I'd missed. Some clue. A letter is so naked. It's someone's hand moving across the page, their pressure dots where they pressed too hard. There were places he'd started to write a word and then gone over it darker, like he'd wanted to cross it out but couldn't commit. I thought, if I could understand how he writes, I could understand him. And if I could understand him, then I could know what he wants. And if I could know that, I could stop it. That's how we trick ourselves, right? We think information equals control. It was around then that I started noticing the hoodie guy more. The black hoodie wasn't special. Half the city wears black hoodies. But once you think you've spotted someone, your brain circles them like a dog circling where it's going to lie down. I saw him at the bus stop near the park. I saw him in the cereal aisle. The cereal aisle made me angry. Don't stand near me while I'm trying to decide between Cheerios and the adult version of Lucky Charms, because now I have to buy oatmeal just to feel dignified. The hoodie guy never looked at me directly in any of these sightings. He just existed in the same space, in my peripheral vision, like a Where's Waldo, where you suddenly realize Waldo is every page. I stopped taking the same route home. I started ducking into stores even if I didn't need anything, just to see if someone followed. I turned off my location services and set all my social media accounts to private. My mom called and asked why I hadn't posted pictures lately, and I told her I was doing a cleanse, which made her laugh because she knows me and knows I would rather be buried alive than give up memes. About a month into this, I found something in my bag. It was near the bottom, caught between the lining and the seam, which is why I didn't feel it sooner. It was an air tag. If you don't know what that is, it's a little button you can stick to things so you can track them if you lose them. Lots of people use them for keys or luggage. Some people use them to track people. My phone hadn't alerted me because whoever set it up didn't mark it as lost. I only noticed because my bag felt heavier and I couldn't find my lip balm. The AirTag was sticky on one side and covered with the lint and crumbs of my life. I held it in my hand and felt my stomach flip like I was in an elevator. I took the AirTag to the police station because I'd read that they could sometimes see the serial number and tie it to an Apple ID. The officer at the desk took it with a gloved hand, like it was evidence in a TV show. He asked if I wanted a restraining order. I said, "Against who?" He said, "You don't need a name to file. It's more symbolic until we have someone to serve, but it establishes a record." I signed the papers. I sat in a hallway with gray carpet and listened to a printer spit out forms with my name under the heading Petitioner, and thought, is this who I am now? A person who petitions. For a little while, things actually calmed down. Or maybe I got used to living with the idea like you get used to a smell in your apartment and stop noticing it. I changed my routines. I got a cheap used bike, even though I'm not much of a cyclist. And I started riding to work on side streets where I could see behind me. I put a baseball bat by my bed, which is laughable because I have no upper body strength and terrible hand-eye coordination, but it made me feel like a person who could do something if I had to. Then, late one night, the fire alarm in the building went off. It was one of those screamers that make your bones vibrate. I grabbed my coat and the bat, because apparently I'm that person now. I ran down the stairs with everyone else, hearts and shoes thudding together. We stood on the sidewalk in a cluster, half awake and shivering. The night was damp, the kind that makes sounds hang in the air a split second longer than they should. There was no smoke, no smell. The fire truck showed up because that's what they do, and the firefighters went in with their gear and came out shaking their heads. False alarm, glitchy panel. They reset it. We all trudged back up. I reached my door and saw my lock plate was scratched. Not deep, not obvious, but scratched. Fresh. Like someone had tried something, or more likely, wanted me to think they had. I stepped in and almost laughed from sheer pressure relief, because everything was exactly as I left it. Shoes by the mat, jacket on the chair, plant with sad braided vines on the sill. Then I saw the picture on my fridge. It was a photo strip that Hannah and I took at a street fair, the kind where it spits out 4 shots: smile, cross eyes, laugh, kissy face. In the middle of the strip, between the cross eyes and the laugh, someone had cut out the section. It wasn't in the trash. It wasn't in the sink. The edges were clean, like someone had used a blade. My heartbeat did this weird stutter, like when an audio file buffers. I stood there for what felt like a long time with my mouth open and my hands not knowing where to go. I took the strip down, put it in a drawer, and sat on the floor. When my phone buzzed, I actually jumped. It was a text from an unknown number. Not the first unknown number. The area code was different. The message was a photo. It was the missing panel from the photo strip. The one of me in mid-laugh, eyes crinkled, head thrown back. Underneath, the text said, "This is the real you." I didn't call the police. I called Hannah. She acts faster than me in a crisis. She said, "Pack a bag. I'm coming." I threw clothes into a tote bag with the kind of urgency that makes you pack weird. I ended up with 2 pairs of leggings and 9 socks. I put my cat's toy in there even though I don't have a cat and never have. My brain just grabbed things that felt like leaving. I was locking up when there was a knock at the door. Not fingertip tapping this time. A real knuckle-on-wood knock. My whole body flooded with cold. I didn't look through the peephole. I didn't say, "Who is it?" I stood there and breathed as quietly as I could, like a child hiding in plain sight. The knock came again, softer now. Then a voice, male, gentle. "Hey, it's Kevin. Kevin is the landlord's son. He's around my age and does maintenance chores sometimes. He once fixed my sink while whistling a tune I never recognized and wore a hat with a curled brim like a 70s baseball player." I didn't move. "Hey," he said again. The fire panel tripped again. "Did you hear anything weird? Any smoke?" His voice had that casual cadence of someone who fully expects to be believed. I opened the door an inch with the chain latched. He looked bored and a little damp from the mist. He smiled. His hoodie was gray, not black. He had paint flecks on his hands, like he'd been in the basement. He said, "Everything okay?" I stared at his face so hard I thought I could see which side he'd shaved from that morning. I said, "Yeah. Sorry. Long day." He nodded. "Okay. If you smell smoke, pull the alarm. Don't hesitate." He started to turn, then paused and said, "Do you want me to look at your lock? Looks like someone tried to jimmy it." His eyes flicked to the scratches. I said, "No, it's fine. It was the movers a while back." He nodded again and left. Hannah arrived 5 minutes later. I went with her. I slept in her spare room, which is really a corner with a curtain, and woke up every time the refrigerator kicked on. The next day we went to my place together. The hallway smelled like someone's cooking garlic and onions. There was a noise like marbles rolling somewhere above us that I could never place. I opened my door and stopped so fast that Hannah bumped into me. On my table was a stack of photographs. They were pictures of me, not printed from my social media, not the cute ones. These were candid, taken from a distance, some slightly blurry. Me at the bus stop with my hands in my coat pockets. Me laughing at something the cafe barista said. Me bent over tying my shoe on the curb. Me through my window, one hand in my hair as I read on the couch. Me leaving the gym with my hair in a messy bun and a band of sweat on my shirt. Me asleep. That last one took me a minute. The angle was high, like from the corner near the ceiling. The light was the bluish white of the streetlight outside, filtered through my blinds. I was on my side, face slack in a way that made me look like another person. Under it, in pen, he had written, "So defenseless." Hannah swore. She grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "We're going to the police." Now I nodded because I didn't have any words. I felt like I'd been emptied out and filled with something heavy. I realized my mouth was dry, and I had to focus on swallowing. The police were different this time. Not rude before, but this time there was an urgency to them that I hadn't seen. They sent 2 officers to my apartment to dust for prints. They told me to make a list of anyone who had keys. I said only the landlord and me. Kevin too, I guessed, for maintenance. They took the AirTag and the letter and the photos. They asked if I'd noticed anyone following me. I said the hoodie guy and immediately felt silly because hoodie guy is as helpful a description as a person with hair. They asked me if I had any enemies. I wanted to laugh at that. Enemies? I pay my bills and forget birthdays and bake cookies from the tube. I don't generate enemies. But of course, an enemy is just a person who decides they are one, right? It doesn't require your consent. They asked if I wanted to stay somewhere else. I said yes. The officer gave me his card and said, "Keep your phone on you at all times. If you see him, if you think you see him, call 911. Don't be polite." That last part stuck with me. Don't be polite. It's hard for me, that one. Hannah made a checklist because that's how she copes. We switched my phone number. We bought a metal door security bar and installed it like we were defusing a bomb, even though it's really just a stick that prods under the doorknob. We put a dowel in the window track so it couldn't slide open. I got a cheap prepaid phone number to give out for deliveries. I told my job I needed to work from home for a while, and they were great about it in that modern way where working from home means you sit at your kitchen table and cry between Zooms. The next weird thing that happened felt less like an escalation and more like a game. I opened my email one morning and found a message from a legal Zoom-type site thanking me for my order. I hadn't ordered anything. The attached PDF was a business registration in my name for a company called Seraphim Ventures. I almost deleted it as spam, but the address on the form was my apartment. He'd registered an LLC with my name. It felt like a joke, but one designed to make me show up somewhere and prove I existed. I called the company. They apologized and said it was disputed and they'd fix it. They told me it happens sometimes, like identity theft, like any other paperwork nightmare. Then my phone buzzed. New number again. "I can help you with your business," the text said. "I know all about you. You're not ready to be alone with the world." I blocked the number. It didn't matter. Numbers are cheap. The police called 2 days later. They had a match on the AirTag. I could hear the tightness in the detective's voice, like he wanted to keep his tone neutral, but couldn't quite manage it. He said, "The tag is registered to a Kevin, last name." I stared at the wall. He kept talking. He said the last name, and it made sense because it was the same as my landlord's. He said, "We'll handle it." I sat down. My legs didn't give out. That seems like a dramatic thing that happens in movies. What actually happened is I sat down like a normal person and put my hands on my knees and tried not to throw up. Hannah said, "What?" And I said, "Kevin." She blinked. "Like Kevin? And then she said, "No, that doesn't make sense." He's so bland, I laughed, and it sounded weird in the room because there was nothing funny. Bland is exactly how you'd want to be if you were doing what he was doing. They arrested him. I didn't see it. The detective called and said, "We brought him in for questioning." He didn't say where they found him, or what he said because that's not how it works. He said they had enough to hold him on charges related to stalking and trespassing. He said the judge issued a temporary restraining order. He said all the things you say to someone you're trying to calm down. And it did calm me, for a day. That night, someone knocked on my door. Not Kevin, not fingertip tapping. A full hand, 3 hard knocks. I knew it wasn't the police because they call first. I stood there with my heart doing that hummingbird thing and said, "Who is it?" A pause. Then a man's voice, low, amused. "You know who?" I waited. He said, "You're going to feel so stupid when you realize how easy it is." I didn't open the door. I called 911 with my phone held hard to my ear like pressing it would make the connection more real. I said my address. I said someone was at my door. The dispatcher asked if I recognized the voice. I said no. The knocking stopped. The voice said, like a stage whisper now, "He's not the only one." I don't know if you've ever been told that the person you thought was the problem is not the person. It's like being in a boat and realizing the leak you've been plugging with a towel is nothing compared to the big hole at the back you never saw. When the cops came, I was sobbing in a way that made me feel embarrassed for myself. They were kind. They looked around. They didn't find anyone. They said it was probably someone messing around because they heard about the arrest, like people do with neighborhood gossip. Probably, the officer said. He put a hand on my shoulder for a second, and then took it away like he remembered the handbook. Kevin confessed to some of it. I learned that from the detective later. He admitted to the notes. He admitted to the AirTag. He admitted to the photos inside my apartment and said he just wanted to be close, which made my teeth itch with anger. He said he never touched me, like that meant anything. He denied the phone calls and the second set of texts. He denied the business registration. He said the photo cut from my fridge was not him. He said he wasn't there the night someone whispered at my door. And the thing is, the timeline supported some of that. The arrest log said he was in custody when the whisper happened. So, there were two of them, or one person borrowing the exit of the other. I don't know which is worse. I moved. Of course I moved. My company let me break my lease by writing a strongly worded letter the way companies do when they smell liability. The landlord didn't fight me. He didn't apologize either. He looked at the ground a lot and kept saying crazy situation, like the words could absorb him. People in the building looked at me like I was a show they were watching and didn't know if they should clap at the end. My new place is on the 3rd floor in a building with buzzer entry and a little courtyard that you need a key fob for. I have 3 locks. I have a camera. I have friends who know my schedule. I carry my keys in my hand between my fingers, like brass knuckles, even though I know that's a bad self-defense technique. And also my palms are soft, and I would probably hurt myself before anyone else. I am careful. I am a person who pays attention. There's more, because of course there is. You don't close a book like this by moving. About 2 months after I moved, I got a package. The label was printed, not handwritten. It had my new address and my name, spelled correctly, which is not easy. It was a small box, the kind jewelry comes in. I stood in my kitchen and looked at it for a long time. My hands shook. I told myself, if it's something awful, it's already there. Schrodinger's package. I opened it. Inside was dirt, just a small baggie of dirt, and a piece of brown paper bag, folded, neat. The handwriting was different. It slanted left instead of right, and the letters were taller. It said, "Plant something new." No signature, no wink, no threat. Innocuous if you saw it in isolation. I called the detective. He sighed in that tired way and said, "We can log it." He asked if I wanted them to come get the dirt. I said yes. They did. I never heard about it again. I planted the dirt in a pot. I know that sounds insane, but I did it. I sifted it into a pot with store-bought soil because even I'm not going to just grow mystery dirt in my house. I put the pot on my windowsill. I watered it. Nothing grew, which is obvious, probably. It was just dirt. But I did it like a ritual. like a way to hang a mask on fear's face. When I stopped watering it, it wasn't a decision. I just forgot. The soil crusted over and cracked, and I moved the pot to the corner behind a plant that actually got its act together and sprouted. Sometimes I still see black hoodies in crowds and feel my throat go tight. Sometimes I hear a knock and my whole body goes cold and then hot in a weird wave. And I stand in the middle of my living room waiting for the next thing. Sometimes my door camera pings at 3 a.m. and it's just a moth and I want to lie on the tile and laugh. Kevin pled to some lesser charges and got probation and mandatory counseling and a moratorium on being within a certain distance of me. I know these things because the court mailed me forms that make you into a character in your own story. The other guy, the whisperer, the phone number changing like a snake shedding skins. I don't know who he is. Maybe no one. Maybe several someones who borrowed the thunder of my life for a while. Maybe he moved on. That's what they say, right? They move on. A few weeks ago, I was coming home with groceries. It was early evening, that sweet spot where the day is done, but the night hasn't decided what it wants to be yet. I stopped at my door to juggle my bags and my keys. My neighbor across the hall, a woman with a French bulldog that snores like a clogged drain, waved and said, "Hey." I said, "Hey." Then I saw something on my doormat. It was small, white. I thought it was paper at first, but it wasn't. It was a slice of a photo strip. One panel. Just a mouth. Not smiling. Not frowning. Just a mouth. It looked like it could be mine. It looked like it could be anyone's. I picked it up. The back was blank. No note. I looked up and down the hall. The light flickered once like the building was inhaling. My neighbor rattled her keys. The dog sneezed. I considered knocking on doors, demanding who put this here. But I didn't. I took the photo inside and slid it into a drawer with the other things I keep to remind myself I'm not making it up. Here's the part I don't tell my mom. And I'm only telling you because I think you'll hear it the way I mean it. Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. Not the fear. Not the feeling of being watched. Not the late night adrenaline shakes. I miss the clarity of having something to be afraid of. When there's a face at the peephole, you know what the problem is. You know what to do. Call, wedge, bar, wait. When there's nothing. When the problem is only sometimes there. And maybe they're plural. And maybe they're just occasionally breathing on the glass. You live in a state of almost safe, almost not. It's exhausting. But I'm okay. I put okay in quotes some days and not others. I go to work. I bike home. I water a new plant. I change my hair, which felt like claiming my face back from anyone who thought they owned its shapes. I still hold doors for people even when they're a little too far away, because that's who I am. And I don't want him, or them, or the general idea of them, to change that. I don't smile at everyone anymore. But when I do, it's because I wanted to. Not because someone wrote it down for me to perform. Last night, my door camera pinged at 2:41 a.m. My heart did that roller coaster click-click at the top. I tapped the notification, already telling myself it was a moth. It wasn't. It was a person. Black hoodie. Hands in pockets. The camera only caught his shoulder, the side of his face as he stood just out of range like an animal deciding if the food is worth the trap. He didn't knock. He didn't slide a note. He stood there for 14 seconds, then took 2 steps closer so the porch light caught his eye like a coin flashing in a fountain. Then he lifted his hand, not to the door, but to the camera itself. He touched the lens with his finger so gently it didn't even smudge. I whispered, without meaning to, "Don't be polite." And for once, I wasn't. I pressed call. I said my address. The operator's voice was calm and measured. I described the hoodie. The person turned and walked away, casual, like we'd had a conversation I couldn't hear. The hall was quiet. My neighbor's dog snored. The police came and walked the building, and I stood in the doorway with my keys between my fingers and my bat leaning against the frame and felt stupid and brave at the same time. They didn't find anyone. They never do when you want them to. The officer asked if I had someone who could stay with me. I said yes. He said, "Call them." I did. Hannah came. We watched dumb TV until dawn, and then she went to work like a person who sleeps. This morning I opened my window to let in air that already smelled like the faint rot of leaves. On the sill, on the inside, someone had set a coin. A quarter. State quarter. The kind with a picture on the back. Montana, I think. I picked it up. It was warm like it had been in someone's pocket. I looked at the latch. It was still locked. I checked the dowel. Still there. I don't know how the coin got there. Maybe I put it down and forgot. Maybe it came with the curtain somehow. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's a message so small that only I can read it. Either way, I took the coin and put it in the dirt of the dead pot, like a seed that doesn't grow. The camera didn't ping. My phone was quiet. I made coffee. I watched people at the crosswalk long enough to feel normal again. A kid on a scooter almost crashed into a mailbox and laughed like falling would have been an accomplishment. An old man fed a pigeon a piece of his bagel and scolded it for being picky. The city kept breathing. If you asked me what I learned, I'd tell you this. Danger doesn't always look like a stranger in a black hoodie. Sometimes it looks like the guy whose job is to fix your sink. Sometimes it sounds like a friendly knock. Sometimes it's multiple someones, taking turns, taking advantage of the groove the other carved. The scary thing isn't that someone wanted to be close to me. The scary thing is how easy it was for them to get what they wanted for as long as they did. The scarier thing is how normal I made it in my head to keep going. I'm not giving you a Hollywood ending. I don't have one. I have locks. I have friends. I have a plant that refuses to die and a pot of dirt with a coin in it. I have a camera that catches moths and sometimes faces. I have a folder of papers that say I'm a petitioner and letters that say I'm a person. I have a story I can tell about how I lived through a thing and am still living through it, which is what most after looks like. If you see me at the crosswalk and our eyes meet and I look away too fast, I'm not being rude. I'm keeping my balance. I'm saving some smiles for me. And for the ones I do give, well, those are earned. Here's the deal. I'm not the type to dramatize. I'm not even the type to post on Reddit. But I need to get this out of my system, and maybe it helps someone pay attention to their gut faster than I did. This is about the months I spent being watched, followed, and messed with by someone who knew me better than any stranger should. I'm fine now, mostly. But I still check the peephole every time I walk past my front door, even when I'm not going anywhere. It started the week I moved into a new apartment. The place was nothing fancy, but it had these big windows and a little balcony, and it felt like a reset. I had a job that I didn't hate, a grocery store in walking distance, and neighbors who nodded and moved on. The first night I slept on a mattress on the floor with boxes around me like a kid fort. I remember feeling proud, I had paid the deposit, signed the lease, and dragged my stuff up 3 flights of stairs by myself. It felt like building a new version of me. On move-in day, the deadbolt was stiff. The key would go in, I'd jiggle it, and it would take some coaxing to turn. I made a mental note to send the landlord a maintenance ticket. That night I came home late with takeout, and the same lock fought me for a full minute until a guy from the hall stepped in. He was wearing a gray hoodie and carried a toolbox. He had this open face that people trust right away. He said he was the building handyman. Name was Eric. He took the key, did that thing where you pinch it in the lock and jerk it up and down, and the deadbolt gave. He told me he'd lube the lock tomorrow and waved it off like nothing. I slept fine. No weird dreams. No creaks that felt like a ghost. The next morning, my welcome mat was a little crooked. I didn't think anything about it. A week went by like that. I unpacked. I learned which part of the shower handle gave you hot water without scalding. I started drinking coffee on the balcony. I kept meaning to put in that ticket about the lock, and kept forgetting because Eric had already fixed it. He said hi when we passed in the hall. He always had the toolbox. He always smelled like clean laundry. The first off note was small. I got a notification from my bank that my debit card was used at a gas station across town at 3 a.m. I was asleep at that time. I called to cancel the card. They refunded the charge. I chalked it up to card skimmer bad luck. The second off note was my laundry. I did laundry in the basement machines like everyone else. I forget if it was a Monday or a Tuesday. I threw in a load of towels and some shirts, set a timer on my phone, and went back down after 38 minutes. The washer was open. Not just done, open, like someone had flipped the lid and walked away. My clothes were still there, soaked, but the lid being up reset the cycle. I looked around the empty room and felt that tiny heat in my chest that says, "Hey, this is weird." I told myself it was some impatient neighbor. I closed the lid and ran the spin again. The third thing was my balcony plant. I keep a little rosemary in a clay pot. I put it out on the balcony because it feels like cooking with a friend when you can just snip some off. One morning I noticed the soil was damp, darker than usual. The rosemary wasn't wet, just the soil, like someone had poked their finger into it. I know how that sounds, but that's what it looked like. A fingerprint almost. I wish I could tell you I trusted my instincts then. I didn't. I laughed at myself and went to work. On the way, I noticed the same gray sedan parked across from my building that I'd seen the day before, and maybe the day before that. It had a sunshade on the dash with cartoon cats on it. That detail would stick with me for months. The first night I felt watched was a Thursday. I was in my living room, curtains open because the windows were the whole point of the apartment, right? TV was on low. I was on the floor putting together a coffee table. There were screws rolling under my thighs, and the instructions were a scrambled mess. I looked up and saw my dark window. Not just dark, reflective. I could see the room and me in it. I could see the TV glow on the wall. And then, behind my reflection, there was a lighter shape on the balcony. I blinked, and it was gone. It could have been a cloud or the way headlights from the street hit the glass. That's what I told myself. I stood up anyway. I pulled the curtain with 2 fingers and looked through. The balcony was empty. The clay pot with the rosemary was still on the corner. The buildings across were quiet and grid-lit like a theater set. I locked the balcony door even though I already had. I started closing the curtains earlier after that. I stopped leaving the balcony door open to get a cross breeze. I bought one of those door wedges that squeal if someone tries to open a door from the outside. My brain liked that squeal. I slept with a podcast droning low so my own thoughts wouldn't turn into monster stories. Meanwhile, little things kept being off. My phone would ping a Bluetooth device nearby with a name I didn't recognize. Like if you've ever been on the train and half a dozen headphones and speakers pop up trying to pair. But this was in my apartment, middle of the day, and the name that came up once was Finder. I Googled it and it could have been anything. A neighbor's tracker, something I had accidentally turned on. But the gut heat flickered again, brighter. I work in a small office. I won't say what. Not because it's top secret, just because I don't want this to be searchable with my name. The office had a glass front door, a receptionist, and a row of open plan desks that made everyone pretend to care about each other's birthdays. I'm not antisocial. I just don't love small talk. We all wore key cards on lanyards. One day my key card wouldn't open the side entrance. The receptionist had to buzz me in. She fussed with a spreadsheet and said my card had been deactivated for 3 minutes at 8:17 a.m. I had arrived at 8:19. I laughed with her about glitchy systems, badge life, whatever. But that feeling again, like a draft you can't find. Another day my manager, nice man, 2 hands off to be a micromanager, put a sticky note on my monitor that said, "Don't forget meeting at 3:30. I didn't have a 3:30. He checked his calendar and said, "Oh, wrong desk." He'd meant to put it on Lisa's. Harmless. Except a few hours later I found the same sticky note in my bag. Same slanted script. Same little dot inside the O because he presses too hard. It was crumpled. I hadn't put it there. And I don't leave my bag open at my desk. I carry it to the bathroom. I zip it. I'm not paranoid. That's just how I'm wired. If this sounds like a slow boil, that's because it was. You don't know you're a frog in a pot until someone tells you the past 30 days were peculiar. It took a friend pointing it out for me to listen to myself. I was on FaceTime with my friend Jay. We've known each other since high school. We don't talk every day, but when we do, it's blunt and honest. I was walking around my living room, showing Jay the new table, the balcony plant, whatever else you show when you're proud and broke. I put the phone down to grab a sweater from the bedroom. While I was away, the camera was still pointed at the living room. When I came back, Jay was squinting at the screen. "What's that?" Jay said. "What's what?" "Behind you, on the wall by the ceiling." I turned. The smoke detector sat dead center above the bedroom door. White circle with a little test button. A smoke detector. That wasn't there before, Jay said. It had been there when I moved in. I could picture it in the listing photos. Jay didn't push, just said okay. Sorry. Maybe the glare tricked me, and maybe that's all it was. But as soon as we hung up, I got on a chair to test the smoke detector. I'm not going to describe exactly what I did, because I don't want to give a playbook to anyone bad. But I'll say this. When I popped the cover, there was something else inside that wasn't part of the smoke detector. It didn't belong. It didn't look like a pro install either. It looked like someone's cheap idea of invisible. I froze. I didn't breathe. I stared at this thing and time got syrupy. I took a picture of it with my phone with my hand shaking so hard I had to take a second one. I put the cover back on and slowly got off the chair. What would you do? I called the non-emergency line. I explained that there was possibly a device in my smoke detector that shouldn't be. The operator's voice got quiet and very careful. She told me to wait in the hall and not touch anything else. She sent a patrol car. 2 officers came up the stairs, asked to see, did the same careful, slow, methodical thing. The older one made a face when he saw it. He told me they were going to take it and see what it was. They asked if I'd noticed anything else off. I said yes, and my voice got high and thin as I listed all the little things that had been nothing, and now looked like a line of breadcrumbs. He didn't laugh. He nodded. He told me to make a list of every weird thing, even if it felt small. He told me to call someone to stay with me that night if I could. I called Jay and asked if they could stay on the phone while I packed a bag. I went to Jay's place and slept on his couch with all the lights on. The cops were not useless. I know that's the hot take sometimes. In this case, they were very practical. They gave me a case number. The younger one said it might be a nanny cam. The older one said even if it was, and even if the person thought they were clever, if they installed it in my apartment without my knowledge, that was illegal. They asked who had keys. I said the landlord, the handyman, me. The older one's eyebrows moved a millimeter. He didn't say it. I said it. Eric, I said, because once I thought it, I couldn't unthink it. I didn't see Eric the next day, or the day after. The lock on my door worked perfectly. I went to work, I came home, I triple-checked the peephole and the slider. I made a pact with myself to be boring for a while. I wrote the list the cop asked for. I wrote it like a timeline. It looked like this. Day 1, move in. Lock sticky. Handyman Eric helps. Day 3, laundry lid open mid-cycle. Day 4, soil damp. Finger mark. Day 7, gray sedan across street. Comic cat sunshade. Day 10, balcony door felt like someone tried handle. Wedge squealed at 2 a.m. I forgot to mention this detail earlier. I had knocked the wedge in and slept. The squeal woke me up, but there was a lot of wind that night, I told myself. I told the list the truth. The wedge squealed. Day 12, work badge deactivated for 3 minutes. Day 14, Bluetooth device finder pops up. Day 17, sticky note in bag. Day 18, shape on balcony at night. Day 19, smoke detector. When you stack it like that, it hits different. I didn't update the landlord right away because I wanted to see what the cops found. Maybe that was dumb. I also avoided talking to neighbors because I didn't want to spook whoever it was. If it was my own paranoia, I didn't want to be the weirdo in 3B. The younger cop called on the 3rd day and said the thing in the smoke detector was a cheap camera with a micro SD card. He said I might not want to know what was on it, and then let me decide. I told him I needed to know. He said they weren't going to show me everything. He said there were hours. He said most of it was my living room empty. A few clips were me watching TV or cooking. He said there were 2 clips of someone standing in my living room. At night. Not long. Just a minute or 2. Like checking angles, moving a chair, looking at the camera and making sure it was pointed right. He said they were wearing dark clothes and a cap. He said he couldn't ID the person yet. He said they were pulling building access logs. I threw up in my trash can after that call, not because they told me some graphic detail, just because the image of a person calmly standing in the place where I sleep while I wasn't there, that short-circuited a part of my head that thinks the world is reasonable. I told the landlord I wanted the locks changed immediately, and the building rekeyed. The landlord said they couldn't rekey the whole building without board approval. I said the police were involved. He said he would change my unit lock himself. He showed up with this new brushed metal deadbolt kit and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He did it fast. He had done it 1,000 times. He set the old lock in his toolbox. I watched his hands. He asked if everything else was okay with the apartment. I said yes. He said the handyman had been sick. I nodded. He left. I made a copy of the new key that same day. I stopped using the balcony. I took the rosemary inside and put it on the kitchen counter. The gray sedan moved. It wasn't across from my building anymore. I started seeing it near my work. Not parked up front, down the block, across at a meter that seemed to always be open when I turned the corner. I told myself probably 100 gray sedans in this city. The cat sunshade gave it away. It's one of those things you might buy as a joke, but in real life only certain people have. I took a picture of the plate. I gave the plate number to the cop. He said he'd add it to the file. This next part is when it stops being little things and turns into someone stepping on my neck. I got a DM on a throwaway Instagram I keep for scrolling recipes and dog videos. The message came from a blank account. No posts. 0 followers. The message was a photo of my balcony plant, the rosemary. The caption said, "You should water it more." I didn't drink water the rest of that day because my mouth felt like chalk and I didn't want to swallow anything that would come back up. I drove to the cop station after work in rush hour and sat there for an hour just to talk to the same 2 officers because they knew the file. I showed them the DM. The older one said the account would likely lead nowhere. They can proxy and cover their tracks. He said people like this make mistakes eventually. He said I should get somewhere safe for a few days and consider packing. He said move if I could. He said, not to scare me, but he'd rather be honest. I asked Jay if I could crash longer. Jay said yes, no question. We went to my apartment together. I left the lights off when I opened the door, and we both stood for a minute to listen. There's a certain kind of silence a place has when nobody's in it. It's different from the silence of waiting. I've lived alone enough to know the difference. That night it felt like neither. It felt occupied. We did a loop, fast, bathroom, bedroom, kitchen, living room. I could hear Jay's breathing change when they saw the bashed inside of my couch cushion. It looked like someone had sat on it, leaned forward with their elbows on their knees, the way people sit when they're thinking or waiting. We grabbed what we could: clothes, laptops, the plant for some dumb reason, like keeping it with me mattered. I locked the door and heard footsteps from the stairwell and froze. Not a jump, not a shock. The steady, measured tread of someone who walks with confidence in your space. The person didn't come to my door. They passed. We didn't breathe. We waited another minute. We left, and I left the wedge behind because I didn't plan to sleep there again that night. If this is exhausting to read, imagine living it. The hypervigilance turns parts of your brain into glass. It all cracks under the smallest tap. The next day, my job called to ask if I was okay. I said yes. Why? The manager said I missed a meeting. I looked at my calendar, and there was a recurring 3:30 on Thursdays that I hadn't made. The notes were empty. The invite was from my own address. I didn't make it. IT said my login had no suspicious activity. Great. Very helpful. I changed my password. Again. The same day, I got a call from an unknown number. Against every instinct, I answered. There was nothing for a second, just the feeling of someone on the other end paying attention. Then a voice that wouldn't have been remarkable if I passed it in a grocery aisle. Male. Mid-30s maybe. He said my name. He said it like he was trying on a shirt. "Hey," he said. "You left your wedge." I hung up. I blocked the number. My hands were shaking so badly that I almost dropped my phone onto the sidewalk. I walked back into Jay's building and leaned my head against the elevator wall like you do when you're too tired to stand upright. I told the cops about the call. They shrugged. They said good job blocking. They said if he called again, keep recording. They said eventually they could try to subpoena records. I asked what I could do now. He said vary my routine. He said don't be alone if possible. He said consider a restraining order if we could identify someone specific. That night I dreamt that the smoke detector blinked Morse code at me, and I learned to understand it. In the morning, I couldn't remember what it said. If you're looking for the part where I buy a baseball bat and wait in the dark, that's not this story. I'm not heroic. I don't like violence, even as pretend. I did the things you can control. I kept a bag packed. I stopped posting anything. I kept the case number in my notes app. I told my boss, and to his credit, he didn't try to fix it with a pizza party. He gave me a few days to work from Jay's couch. The gray sedan moved again. I stopped seeing it near my job. I started seeing it in places I didn't expect anyone to notice me. One was the back parking lot of the grocery store. One was the vague line of cars during street cleaning, where everyone double parks for an hour with the hazard lights on. The sunshade. Those cartoon cats were like a grin that didn't change no matter what was happening. Jay said I should stay with family. I said I didn't want to bring this to my mom's door. Jay said okay, and didn't push. Jay is good like that. Jay also bought me a cheap door alarm for the apartment that shrieks if the door opens, and some window alarms. We set them up together when we went back to get more of my stuff. The place smelled faintly like someone else's cologne. Not heavy. Just there. It made me want to peel my skin off so none of it could stick. Here's the part where we started getting answers. The cop called and said they pulled access logs for my building. Every time the main front door opens, it logs the key fob number. Residents, the landlord, the handyman, delivery passes that get issued and expire. He said my apartment door itself doesn't log opens, obviously, but the building front door does. He said there were late-night entries on nights I wasn't home. He said the fob used matched the maintenance fob assigned to the handyman. I said, Eric. He said he couldn't say that until they spoke to the landlord. But yes, the fob was the one signed out to maintenance. He said fobs can be shared. He said there were still steps to take. I asked if they were going to arrest him. He said not yet. He said if I could, I should not be in that apartment for a while. I confronted the landlord, texted and called until he picked up. I asked him if the maintenance fob is always with Eric. He said yes, unless a contractor borrows it. He sounded like a guy watching a pie fall off a windowsill. He kept repeating, "We'll get to the bottom of this." I asked if they were going to suspend Eric. He said, "Let's not rush." I told him that something illegal was installed in my apartment, and his fob was used to enter after midnight on days I was gone. He paused. He said he'd talk to Eric and call me back. He didn't. Jay and I did our own surveillance because helplessness is a bad fit for me. We parked down the block from my place with the windows cracked and sat with greasy paper cups of coffee going cold. We watched the front door. We watched the gray sedan when it slid into a spot like it had a reservation. We watched a man get out. He wore a hoodie with the hardware store logo on the back and carried a small bag. He wasn't looking around like a movie creep. He looked like a person doing a job. He was taller than I remembered. Or maybe fear makes everyone bigger. He used a fob, went inside. He came out 15 minutes later and stood on the sidewalk for a second under my window. He looked up. Not around. Up. At my unit. He did a thing with his face like he was smiling with just the top row of his teeth. Then he got in the gray sedan and left. We had plates. We had a face. We had a timestamp. We gave all of it to the cops. They said thank you like we were giving them a casserole. They said they would talk to him. They said to not engage. The next day, a paper slid under my door at Jay's place. Not at my apartment. At Jay's. It was a printout of one of my own photos. Me on my balcony with a mug. My head turned, hair in my eyes. There was a note on the back in tight block letters. Someone could hurt you. Be careful. I'm not a person who cries when angry. I get very still. I get very practical. That day I cried. Jay held the paper in 2 fingers like it might bite, and then put it in a plastic sandwich bag because fingerprints are a thing you see on TV, and logic doesn't matter when your body is ringing like a bell. We gave the note to the cops. They stopped being polite and started being proactive. They got a warrant for Eric's place. I didn't know you could do that so fast. But I guess sometimes the stars align, and a judge sees the shape of a story and decides to act. This is the part where I'm going to spare details. Not because I want to be coy, but because the list of things they found at his apartment made me shake so hard, I bit the side of my mouth and tasted blood. They found my old lock. They found multiple micro SD cards. They found photos taken through my window. They found a notebook that was basically a diary, but not about his own life. About mine. Places I went. Times I came and went. What I wore. Which side of the bed I sleep on. Nothing graphic. Everything creepy. You know which one of those is worse? The one that says your regular life is someone else's favorite program. They arrested him. He posted bail. Because that's how it goes. Wait. Let me say that again because it felt like getting shoved into cold water. They arrested him, and he was back out the next day. I moved. I broke the lease. The landlord tried to keep the deposit, and I said I would plaster the case number on every review platform that exists. He let it go. I found a place across town with fewer windows, but thicker doors. Jay helped me carry boxes at midnight because nighttime made everything sharper, and being alone made my skin crawl. My mom cried when I told her after it was over. That's why I didn't tell her while it was happening. I can handle me being scared. I can't handle my mom being scared. Changing apartments doesn't make you feel safe right away. It buys you the possibility of safe. I did all the things. New lock with my own hardware. I watched the installer like a hawk. I changed my routines. I drove a different way to work, then switched grocery stores. I set up a camera of my own pointed at the front door, and then hated that there was a camera in my house. I slept with a light on for a month. The court stuff ground slow. I didn't testify at a trial yet. He took a plea on something smaller while the bigger stuff is still pending. Or was, last I checked. I stopped following every single update because it kept me stuck in that month where everything was a signal. I gave my statement. I pushed for the protective order. I got one. It's a piece of paper until someone enforces it. But sometimes a piece of paper is enough to put a wall in a head, maybe even his. This should be the end. I moved. He got arrested. I have a new lock and a shorter list of trusted people. But there's a coda because of course there is. Stories like this don't fade to black just because you want them to. A few weeks after I moved, I was unpacking the last box. It was books and a blanket that smelled like the old place, like the way dust smells in morning light. I was alone. I had music on because silence makes me hear my own heart too loud. The front door camera pinged. I glanced at my phone. The camera showed the hallway outside my new unit. Empty. Motion alert. Sometimes it does that if a bug flies by or the HVAC burps. I shrugged. It pinged again. I checked again. Empty. The third ping made me pause. I watched a live feed for 10 full minutes. No one. No movement. Just the jitter of a low-light camera and the narrow slice of linoleum beyond my door. I turned off the camera peephole and looked through the actual old-school peephole with my eye. Nothing. I felt tired in my ribs. I went to the kitchen and poured a glass of water, and then the front door handle moved. Not a knock. A tentative turn, like someone testing if it was locked. I put the glass down, and it tapped the counter like a bell. I didn't yell. I didn't stomp. I walked to the door and put my palm flat against it and said in a voice I didn't recognize, "The police already have you on video. Leave." Silence. Then a small scrape, like a shoe pivoting. Then steps. Not fast, not guilty. Just leaving. I called 911. I gave the building address. I said someone tried my door. The operator asked for description. I said I didn't have one. I stared at the camera on my phone. It had captured nothing. The recording starts when it detects motion, and apparently, it decided the handle turning wasn't movement enough, or the lag is real. The patrol came and did the exact same loop I've watched cops do on TV 1,000 times. They were calm. They were patient. They knocked on a couple doors to check if anyone saw anything. They didn't find anyone in the stairwell. They told me to call if anything else happened tonight. I said thanks because I've learned that being rude won't make the world faster. I sat down on my floor among half-unpacked boxes and stared at the new lock. I stared until my eyes watered from not blinking enough. I told myself it could have been anyone. Maintenance. Meter reader. Wrong door. Drunk person. I told myself a dozen not horror reasons. I don't know which it was. That's the truth I can live with. I don't know. The not knowing is a roommate I didn't ask for. If you want a moral, I can give you a handful of practical ones. Change your locks when you move in, even if the landlord looks offended. Cover the peephole at night from the inside when you sleep in a well-lit hallway. Put a cheap alarm on your door. If your building has a guy who is always around, learn his last name and the name of his supervisor. Ask questions even if you feel silly. Listen to the small off notes. But the bigger moral is not actually a checkbox of safety. It's this. The line between ordinary life and horror is slimmer than you think. And sometimes all it takes is one patient person on the other side of it to push. Don't be ashamed if it takes you a minute to admit you're on the wrong side. You don't owe anyone proof of how weird it felt. I still drink coffee on a balcony sometimes, though not often. I brought the rosemary plant to the new place, and it's died twice, and somehow keeps trying to grow back from a tiny green sprig. I'm not superstitious, but if I were, I'd say maybe some things are stubborn about living, me included. Months went by. I dated someone briefly and ended it because even when they were late by 5 minutes, my brain started building a house out of panic. I got better at telling the difference between a gut warning and a stress echo. The gray sedan stopped showing up in my life. Or maybe it never did, and I only looked for it everywhere like a word you can't stop hearing once you notice it. The court clerk called a couple more times. The restraining order gets reviewed every so often. I keep the paper copy in a kitchen drawer under the takeout menus. Sometimes I forget it's there, and then I have to lift the stack of menus and feel the weight of it to believe it's still real. A few weeks ago, I was leaving the new building and the lock fought me for a second. It sticks sometimes when it's humid. I jiggled. It turned. And on autopilot, I looked down the hall and saw a guy with a toolbox coming out of the stairwell. He had a different uniform shirt. New building, new staff. He smiled, asked if I needed help. My mouth said I'm good. My body said run. He passed, went the other way. He didn't even look at my door. The toolbox clicked against his leg. The sound it made was like a metal cough, and for a second my vision narrowed like putting a hand over a flashlight. Then it widened again, and I kept moving. I didn't run. I didn't freeze. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button. That's where I'm at now. Most days just living. Some days feeling the old heat in the gut when a Bluetooth name pops up, or the door handle feels warmer than it should. I'm not going to wrap this up with some brave speech. I'm not brave. I'm cautious. And I learned the hard way to treat weird as a fact, not a feeling. If you needed someone to tell you it's okay to act on the first weird, let it be me. Before I hit post, there's one last thing. It's small. It might be nothing. It's probably nothing. Yesterday I got a letter with no return address. Inside was a photo of a cat sunshade, not in a car, just leaned against a wall, like someone took it in their garage. On the back was that same tight block printing. Someone could hurt you. Be careful. I took the letter to the police and added it to the file. I came home and watered the rosemary so I had something regular to do with my hands. I locked my door and checked it twice, once by habit, once by choice. Then I sat down and wrote this, not to scare you, not to turn my life into content, just to say, if you feel watched, if your life has small pieces out of place, you're not crazy for seeing the pattern. You don't owe anyone proof. You owe yourself a reaction that keeps you safe. If that sounds like something your best friend would say, that's how I mean it. Keep your spare keys where only you can get them. Make your front door boring and your routines unpredictable. Trust the way your stomach drops for no reason. And if a person with a toolbox and a friendly face tells you he can fix your lock, watch his hands, and then change the lock again anyway. I go to sleep now with a light on in the hall and a glass of water by the bed. Sometimes I dream that the smoke detector is blinking again, and I wake up with my heart pounding and laugh because there is no smoke detector in the new place. It's a heat sensor. Different little white circle. New shape for the same job. Maybe that's me too. Same job. New shape. I still check the peephole. I still listen for the wedge squeal even though there's no wedge on this door. Sometimes I hear it in my head anyway. That's okay. Sometimes the body keeps the last alarm going a while after the fire is out. I'll be careful. You be careful too. And if you ever wonder whether you should file a report or call a friend to stay the night, do it. Pretend I'm standing in your kitchen, telling you to pack a bag right now. Put the plant on the counter so it sees you leave. You don't owe anyone an explanation for wanting to sleep where nobody has ever stood in the dark and watched you. You only owe yourself that peace. That's the whole story for now. If anything changes, I'll update. But honestly, I hope I never have to.